Kirsten and I kind of decided that it would be cool. So we're gonna do like 6 workshops in total over the next sort of while, and um, like just kind of like looking at the world that we're in. We're like, what's going on? You know, like what do artists do? Like how do people make it? Like how do people survive in this world? You know, and like Kirsten and I were both in situations where we were doing a lot of music work. The pandemic comes and it like honestly does screw with that quite a lot. And then like you know, even just the basic idea that if you know something, you can go and teach it to somebody else. And then if they know something, they can teach you something else. And that's like, uh, we don't think about that often as like artists, maybe as being one of the central roots, being like research and study, teaching and sharing. And so, like, for me with this whole sound thing, I just thought it would be cool if that's like what we were doing. And but the part that I feel like I can really where I have something to offer that's like cool is that I got to study physics in university, and it wasn't really something that I had thought I was going to do. My parents like really pushed me in to do it. And especially when the pandemic hit, the way that it really started to I realized like help me out in my life was just that like uh we're like living in a world where there's like overlapping multiple truths, and everybody kind of has their own truth, and it's honestly very confusing, and it's honestly quite problematic. Like because it's like how can you sort out what is reality, you know? And I mean honestly, like what is and this comes back to even questions of like what is time, like how do we touch base with, because like this quality that reality has is that it's shared, right? That we might all have our own individual truths, but then there is something that we experience together, and that the fact that there is that thing is the hallmark of this reality, and I'm just so interested in that. And then like one of the things that I think that like physics, mathematics and music kind of like are all pointing to is just like how can we come up with a way to agree on something? Like, because it's actually really, really, really complicated. Especially if we want to agree on something where we're not like just defaulting to the power hierarchies that like inform who's in charge. And then so, because this is like when I started to study acoustics in school, I was like kind of really interested in sound, um, because I make music, and there's just no doubt to me that like certain sounds make me feel, make me cry, you know, like change my life. That's crazy. I don't understand that part. Like I can't, and the truth is I can't really help anybody understand that part for themselves. Like that is crazy mystical, you know? And it does make working with sound and music really hard, I think, because like what like it's not clay, you know, like how can you work with something that's like emotions, it's kind of heavy, right? uh and so one of the things that I really wanted to get to in this is um try to get to this idea that something my teacher used to always say is that sounds don't come from your imagination. Like music doesn't come from your imagination, it comes from reality. Everything that you dream, you you hear in the world. And hearing is actually like such a unique sense because like unlike seeing, although we see in stereo, we hear in stereo in 360 degrees 24/7, because even when you're asleep you're hearing, unlike when you sleep with your eyes closed, right? Or even what you see, you only see in this one direction, but I can't see behind me. So like there is actually there is something about sound itself that is like is really important essentially. And like I guess the next question that I have, which is like sort of connected and just like this is a path that I'm kind of trying to go down, is like what is a wave?
Well, for me, a wave is a signal which varies over time. You know, and I guess I'm mostly informed by like physics. I think it's the same as you. But it's like you've got something that you can sense or measure, and that thing is changing with respect to with time or some other measure. And yeah, and maybe the recording of that over that time could be a wave. But then there's like the more intuitive part that it's a vibration or an oscillation, or there's like some midpoint, and you get some kind of reflection over that midpoint, some kind of like spring-like behavior, I guess.
Yeah, and like anybody else, like what it like honestly just like word association, wave, like
I actually had thought of something while Devin was explaining some, which I thought was great because I feel like sound is definitely scientific. So when I heard wave, I thought synonymously with water. Water is simply a platform that exists that within that element, it can create different results or certain conditions are met. So when I look at wave, I look at water being a platform. A wave is created when there's enough energy to create a wave that, of course, creates that body of water that moves. Water still moves, but the wave is just the action of what takes place in water. So when I look at wave, or that is just basically energy with an assignment. It's this much energy, this much power, this much force, and it creates this much of a result. Of course, waves can be as small as a puddle or as big as a tsunami. Either or, it's a wave or ripple of something, something that is created at a point of impact. So that's how I look at it. So just kind of because I kind of stack on top of what he said, because that was a good point to build from.
That's amazing. Thank you, David. Can I just read what's in the chat here? Arjun says waves go up and down.
Yeah.
The question mark, but
no,
I would
totally.
say it's a statement because they sure do. Jamal says a wave can be individual. Sorry, could you confirm that word there? Force of sound that travels through air. Yeah.
Yeah, what I put was waves can be invisible force of sounds that travel through the air.
Right. Invisible, sorry. Yeah. Okay. I like that. Mo and Mo, perpetual movement, crash. Yeah. Jamal, invisible. Oh, you corrected it there. Mo and Mo, collision. Kelvin, energy. Nice. I like all of those.
Yeah, it's cool. Also, like the one that gets me, honestly, that gets me is this one.
Right.
But like, yo, like very literally, this is a wave.
Natural movement. Kirk said.
And it's honestly one of these things that's really quite funny, because then it's like, okay, well, do you ever see where do you see waves around you? Anybody want to go for these?
Literally everywhere, but we can't see them. Well, sound waves at least.
I was going to say that they're literally what we can see. All light is like waves.
Yeah. It's waving everything, even at the sports stadium when people get through that little sit up and sit down thing. It's just like one big synonymous circle and then it stops.
That's a wave.
Just looking at the multiple, examples that it could imply, but still effective to the point. So yeah, man, waves are everywhere in day-to-day life, science, everything.
Yeah, let's get some more.
Can I say hair? Like hair, like wavy, Sometimes you just be wavy.
Micro.
Agree.
My little baby hairs. Yeah.
Oh man.
And honestly, Kirsten, that is one of the points that I want to make too, which is like, if you look in nature, this is a pattern that comes out of nature. Like, you know, honestly, does that hair have to curl with a specific frequency? Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. That's the point. Like the fact that frequency is a fundamental concept in just parsing what you see around you is kind of what people started to realize. That was like the harmonic expansion of thought in mathematics, really. Like when people started using waves, scientific waves, which were really just wiggles that look like you think they do, and they figured out how to describe those and describe the world around them kind of through this idea. Like but it's also really interesting too, because like, for example, oh, maybe I can do this. Like, you see this pattern on my sheet? Like, is that a wave? Does it repeat?
Yeah.
I mean, if you go and look at the banisters, or banister is not the word, is it? Like, God, that's embarrassing. You know what I mean? Like, if you go and look at a fence and it's got the fence posts like that, is that a wave? And honestly, like, you see the fence posts like that, when you drive past the fence posts like that, and there's like a fence post and then blank, a fence post and blank, don't you see it flashing at you like that? And like that way, the rate that it flashes at you, that's the frequency. That's the frequency of the flashing that you're seeing. Is that a wave? Yeah. And then I remember, Kirsten, you and I were doing this when I was chatting with you yesterday. Like, so is this a wave? Yeah, that's a wave, right?
Yeah.
Like when you see that, you're like, yeah, that's a wave, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so that's obvious. What about like this one? Oops. What about this one? Like, is that a wave?
I would say so.
Yeah, it's a wave. Yeah, it's a wave. And what about like this one? Was that a wave?
I would say so.
I'd say a part of one because it could be just a zoomed in aspect. That's how I'm looking at it.
A
No.
part wave. Yeah.
And also too, like, what if the wave is just this frequency, like from here to here, and that's the whole wave?
Mm-hmm.
It's just a really low frequency wave. That's what low frequency waves look like. So if that's a low frequency wave, and I'm like, yeah, sure, that's a wave. Well, then is this a wave?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is a low frequency wave. That's a fact. And in fact, and I'm gonna even just go for it. Like, is this a wave?
It, it looks like a swamp monster, but I think it's a wave.
Like, you kind of get.
It's like it depends on if we're talking like one-dimensional waves or like multi-dimensional waves, because then I think it's a wave. But
Yeah, I mean, like, if that's the answer, if the answer is like it depends on which dimension we're talking about, then couldn't we just say, yeah, sure, it's a freaking wave?
yeah, I think it's a wave.
And like, again, why am I being so obnoxious like this? The whole point is just to be like, okay, like the idea that there are things that vibrate, the idea that there are waves around us, this isn't some kind of niche idea that just comes into play because we're talking about music. Like, shit, things repeat. What else repeats? I don't know, the day? Is the day a wave? I'm going to tell you for sure the day is a big old wave.
Mhm.
Like, is the year a wave? Is a month a wave? And like, what are we kind of talking about when we're talking about those waves? And so this actually kind of brings me to the next part of what I really, really wanted to touch on, which is that waves come from circles. And like, this is kind of where we get into this one part that is like, this is like where everyone's math teacher just abandoned them. They're like, yeah, math, it's really important. I'm not going to tell you this thing about waves that they're circling. Like, is there anybody here who is like, I did not know a wave and a circle were the same thing?
I didn't know.
And so now I'm gonna actually, I'll just show you what I mean instead of just, because this is again too this thing that I just love about the idea of working on a math problem together is like, I'm not really here to fool you, you know? I'm not here to get you to believe what I'm saying. Like, I really think that what I'm showing you these are some of the most basic things that just come from nature. That when we observe them too, for me, I don't have shit going on. I used to go on tour all the time, have fun. Just observing the little pretty things around me definitely keeps me from going nuts. So I love sharing this kind of stuff. And like, let's say that all I'm curious about right now is, okay, so first of all, here's my laser pointer. You see that? And this is me like going around the circle because that's what we do when we have a circle. We go around it. And so, now the thing that I want to know about, like, I just want to know about how far I am from the line that I'm about to make green. Okay. So you see this green line? I'm gonna put that green line there, and then now I'm the red circly dot again, right? And now all I want to know is how far from the green line am I? So right now, how far from the green line am I?
You're on the green line.
I'm on the green line, right? And so like as I go counterclockwise around this circle, I start to get further away from the green line, kind of in like an upward direction, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll just like dotted line, right? And so as I go up along it, this is what will happen, is this green dotted line is getting longer, right? Until it hits that point. So again, here I am. So the green line gets longer, gets longer, gets longer. There it's at its toppest point. And then what happens after it gets to its top point? It starts to come down, right? We get this. And it comes down until what? It hits the ground again, right? And then it does the funniest thing. It starts to go like underground, right? And then it gets bigger, more deeper underground, until it hits the deepest part underground right there. And then it starts to come back up, right? And that's what would happen if we just looked at the vertical component, the up and down component of us going on that circle, right? It just passes each dotted line. And so if I was to draw me going around that circle, but instead of going around it like this, I'm going this way, what I would see is, or like if I was to plot out, for example, like how I would say that, is I'll plot out the length of the line on here. And then when I get back to green, here we are at green. So remember when we start out, I'm like at the bottom, right? It's at 0. And then the line just keeps getting longer until it hits the toppitiest point, which we'll say is there. And so it goes kind of like that until it gets to the toppest point. And then after it hits the toppest point, it keeps going forward, but it starts to come down until it gets back to 0. And then it gets bigger in the negative, right? Until it gets the most negative right here, which would be like right there, I guess. And it comes around. And then it gets smaller in the negative until it hits 0 again. And there we are, right? And again, like if I just keep going around and around in the circle, it'll just keep following that same pattern. Like it'll just make a wave that goes like that, you see?
Yeah.
And the other thing that we'll notice is if I did the exact same thing, but I was, instead of looking at that green line, I'm looking at this yellow line here, right? And then so if I start at the same place I started, okay, well the yellow line is like fully outward, right? And then as I go around the circle, the yellow line gets smaller until it hits its 0 point. And then it gets bigger in the opposite direction until it gets the biggest. And then it gets smaller again, right? Until it's at 0. And then it gets bigger in the positive direction until it hits that 1 again. So what we notice is that yellow wave looks like this. It's biggest when that one's smallest. Then when this one's when this one's biggest, this one hits 0 here. When this one hits 0, this one's at its biggest. When this one's at its top, this one hits 0. When this one's at 0, this one's back at its biggest. And then we get this wave. And obviously, too, this wave can keep going. Looking like that. And
So if you don't mind, Nick, could you explain to us what that yellow line represents?
oh yeah. And so like in mathematics, I guess like these waves are called sine and cosine, honestly. Like this is really, these are the basic trigonometric functions in trigonometry. Like
Them calculators, I remember.
yeah, and anytime so all it's saying is that if you go around the circle, like the vertical part of you is making a cosine and the horizontal part is making a sine wave, or the other way around. The vertical part, the green part, is making a sine wave and the yellow part is making a cosine wave. And as you can see there, then like what are called in mathematics sine and cosine are the exact same thing. It just depends on where you start. But the biggest thing that I'm trying to show you here is like when I have my circle that I'm going around.
Sorry, is that cool with everyone? What was just explained?
Yeah,
Like-
I'm following fine.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and honestly, like I know because I've done this before that the hardest part of doing group teaching is to get people to feel comfortable enough to just like spit out a question whenever you feel them coming. And that's fine,
Just cut right in.
but just do it. Like I don't give a fuck. And so, okay, so and then so you know how we're talking about how we have these waves, right? That we saw kind of on the last page. These ones. So you actually only need 2 pieces of information to describe a wave. Does anybody know what those 2 pieces of information are?
Amplitude and frequency.
Okay, well, those are the answers. But, and then, so anybody else so yeah, I'm just gonna go do this. So amplitude, frequency. Does somebody want to tell me what these words mean?
Mo and Mo say height of wave for amplitude.
Yeah.
The height of the wave.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah. Correct.
Yeah, so the amplitude is the height of the wave. So like if I was gonna, so there would be like this wave. It's a pretty small wave. And then it'd be this wave. That's like a bigger wave, right? So those are the differences in amplitude.
What about frequency?
Anybody?
I'll take a guess at it. Frequency, I'm assuming, would be, I guess, how long, or I guess the tuning parameters that the wave is set under until it completes, or I guess a particular wave assignment, or I guess amplitude assignment there. So that's my hands and that's my 2 cents in the bucket there.
Oh,
And so on
like
just
tuning? Just to be clear as to what you said. So like the tuning of it?
Yeah, or just like the tuning rate, or I guess like the speed, or I guess like how. Okay, so when I think of frequency, I just look at the particular wave pattern, or I guess the speed limit of the wave. Like if you're set to 2200 or 1500 or 432 or 528, that's really the speed limit that the wave is set to travel on until it completes this assignment.
Nice.
Yeah, and also too, so like the sickest thing about waves that I'm trying to get at too is like, remember how I drew that line like this and I was like, is that a wave? So what's the frequency of that wave?
Low frequency, the ones
Low.
that have the tighter oscillation, that looks like that's this, I guess the space in between the waves here, that's just how high or how much it is. So I guess I kind of cracked the code there.
Yeah, that was it. It's like literally the word frequency. It like it's such a funny word because it really is like frequently. How frequently does that thing happen, right?
Mm.
A
How
great
frequent
word.
that
Yeah.
is
Let's
where
see.
the word frequency comes from. There's no doubt about it. So for example, like this is oops. So this is like a low frequency wave, right? And in comparison, this would be like a high frequency wave,
Mhm.
right? And really, and what am I saying? How frequently does it hit the top?
Mhm.
Like this one is high frequency, and this one is low frequency. Because look, when I drew it, this one hits the top like a bajillion times, and this one hits the top like 3 times,
Mhm.
right?
Mo and Mo say high frequency equals your heart rate when you see your crush. True that. Right. But yeah,
Yeah.
like
Oh,
a high amount of beats, and that's how you tie rhythm in. So you kind of cracked a code there too.
and that's like a really interesting thing to bring up because like when we talk about something being like high or low frequency, like that shit doesn't mean anything because it's only in relation to what, right? Because like, you
Mm.
know, like in the frequency of a sound like, oh, well, that's very high frequency compared to like the sound waves moving through the earth, of which there are sound waves moving through the earth that are the entire size of the earth. And that's a fact.
Right. Jamal says frequency is when you have anxiety, or when your teacher tries to explain an assignment and changes the rubric mid talking.
Yo, for real. And again,
Yeah.
like, you know what's actually super deep about this is like, what are we talking about? We're talking about two things. We're talking about the heart and we're talking about breathing.
Mm.
Because it doesn't matter what you look up, what is the definition of spirit? Like literally, what is the etymology of the word spirit? Does anyone know? It's very literally the word breath.
Mm.
The word spirit is the old word for breath. Very literally, spirituality means the science of breath.
Mm.
Literally. Like, that's a cold fact. And there's this funny thing about breathing, which is that's a wave. Like,
Mm.
whether you like try to breathe without frequency.
Right. Breathing without frequency would just be nada. You just wouldn't be.
Because there's an exhale
Mhm.
and an inhale. And again, remember, like, what's the purpose of doing this workshop? We're talking about reality. That's all we want to do. We want to talk about reality. Like, I don't care about people's music or making music. Like, everyone makes the most beautiful music ever, right? Like, why do we want to work with music? Because people say whatever the fuck they want, man. Like, people create whatever kind of truth they want. And, like, learning about vibration is very, very important. Because if you think there are systems that can go this way without having to come back this way, what kind of systems are those? They're systems that stop. In fact, like again, too, if you keep looking in differential equations, like there are systems that go like this, there are systems that go like this. And then there are systems that go like this. Find me another way. If your breathing was like this, you'd be dead. If your breathing was like this, you'd be dead. You breathe like this. It's worth looking into. And again, too, what's the frequency of your breath? And oh, the reason, sorry, I brought this side of it up too is like kind of everybody knows, or like somebody, like we already talked about it in the class, like high frequency anxiety, low frequency calm. That's not just something that we're talking about your physiology. We're talking about your heart rate. We're talking about the at which you're breathing, like, and that is kind of like the purpose too of a lot of this is like of just like awareness practice, right? Like, why do things go back and forth? Because that is the only modality of balance. Like, even when we think of something being balanced like this, oops, like this, you know what I mean? Like that like a straight line. But if I zoom in, I can see that there's a little vibration on the straight line. You know? Just in my hand, there's parts where I go slightly above and parts where I go slightly below. And if you look carefully at anything, you'll see that they're like that this concept of frequency is actually like what divides systems into kinds of different classes. And like I don't like talking like that because it's like science speak, but what I mean is actually kind of this one really literal thing, which is hertz. So who is familiar with this thing?
I think it's like kind of like an abstract way to measure frequency, but like you said, the idea that it's relative to like some standard, which I'm actually not even sure what that is, but maybe 0 hertz being the lowest that we can hear as human.
Actually,
Awesome.
0 hertz is it's no vibration.
Oh,
So
right.
this is really kind of nothing like 0 hertz. Actually, does anybody know what so this is called a hertz?
Does anyone else have any definition of hertz that they wanted to share? Mo and Mo say whale language. Nice.
I'll just add that the standard that Lucas is talking about is number of repetitions per second.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then what is the made up standard?
1 second.
It's 1 second. But anyway, like Devin, you're totally right. And anybody who's curious, anytime you see the letters HZ, it's not Heinz ketchup. It's hertz. And what is 1 hertz? It is equal to 1 thingy per second. That's what it is.
Can I ask a question? So why is it one thing per second? Why a second?
Because again, like it's just so that we could have a number, like a number system that starts to make sense. You know what I mean? Because you can count how many times something happens in a second if you know what a second is. And like that's again too why like in these European traditions we see things like hertz, because people are like tying themselves into the tradition of time. But what is older, rhythm or time? And there is a very literal real answer to that. Like this isn't wishy-washy.
I would say rhythm.
It's a fact. That's a fact in physics. You can't build a clock until you know how to clap. Somebody tell me you could do that. Wrong. You can't build a clock until you understand what the motion of a pendulum is. You simply could not. You simply could not. That's where the standards came from.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy. It's crazy. And again, too, what is a second? It's just when you take a year and divide it into 360, and then you take that and you divide it into 12, and then you divide it into 60, and you divide it into 60. It's just division of a day to come up with an arbitrary standard that we all agree upon.
Yeah, I guess it takes us back to what you said in the beginning, like having agreements to something. And this is, we're uncovering things that we can all just agree upon, or that we automatically agree on without even really.
But this is kind of a cool, like this, it's cool, like this gives us a lot, this Hertz idea, this one thing per second, right? Because like, let's say, for example, like you guys are familiar with the fact that like a sound has a frequency, right? So for example, like when we hear a sound that would be like, "Woo," it could be described as having something like, I'm just going to say 440 Hertz, right? So what does that mean?
So the definition of Hertz is what?
Is like a thing per second.
A thing per second, so 440 things per second.
Yeah, and so like in this case, like if what we were thinking about was like a clap, right? Like if you could clap 440 times in 1 second, it would make a sound that sounded like this, like woo. And in fact, like the lowest pitch that a human ear can pick up is actually 20 hertz.
20 to 20.
Yeah, that's it, 20 hertz. That's the lowest frequency that the human ear is able to resolve. And so that's really interesting, right? Can you clap 20 times a second? Anybody want to try? Calvin can. Honestly, I know Calvin can do it. That's why.
Whoa.
Honestly, look at that. Look at that. Look at that. So funny. And if you could clap 20 times a second, you know what would you hear?
A very, very deep bass.
Yeah, like so okay, so that's 20 hertz. But then so what is, like, let's say, what is 1 hertz then? It's like 1 clap per second, right? Could you clap once per second? Yeah, right? It'd be kind of like, I don't know. So what this is saying, and this is kind of like hopefully a I think it might be a breakthrough for some people, but this is really, really important. Pitch and time, rhythm time, clapping time are the same thing. If you could clap at the frequencies provided that you hear those pitches, those tones at, you like, that's all a tone is. So when you sing, what's happening is you're actually producing this vibration, this sound structure in air that is hitting your ear however many times per second. And that's what we perceive as tone.
Amazing.
Yeah, like, does anybody have any thought, like comments or thoughts or questions on that? Like, I hope that's like a big
That's definitely mind-blowing to me, and I feel like it yeah, like it's just like some of the most powerful stuff that I've like heard about music. And like recently, like somebody talking about John Coltrane's music, and how it like physically kind of rearranges your body, like
it,
in the way that, or at least that's like one like experience of it, where like think about how like sound, like if you get a rush, like a huge rush of sound, like feeling like in cartoons, like sometimes people's hair gets blown back by a horn or something, um and yeah, like it just brings up the possibility for like things that you can make to like physically change you, which is like really cool.
That's such an interesting thought. Like, and that's where my mind goes to. Just it brings me to a place of like, okay, so if I understand what frequency is and what it does, then I can understand what's operating on a certain frequency and like resonate with that myself, like create a sound that resonates with something outside of me, which is really cool to think about. And the idea, the way you summed it up, Nick, just the idea that rhythm is really just that rhythm and frequency are just the same thing.
Yeah, right.
Need rhythm to make any frequency. It's like
And so-
nothing separate. It's all the same.
And the other thing too is, so like these words here, like amplitude and frequency, these are Latin 8 words. These are fucking complicated Latin 8 words that complicated Europeans came up with to come to an agreement about something. But what do we, like when we're talking about sound and you hear these words, what do they mean? I mean, like we kind of really did already cover this, but frequency is just pitch, right? Like anytime you see the word frequency in sound, it's just another word for what note it is. And so like we don't really think about this often when we sing different notes, but like the different notes we sing, they space the air out around us differently. They actually create these different structures in the air. And so anytime you hear pitch, like all there is to know about one of the only 2 ways to manipulate a wave, period. So pitch, and then what is amplitude? It's just how loud it is. And so what we're saying here is, because remember how I said there's very literally only 2 operations on a wave ever, frequency and amplitude? What I'm saying is there's only pitch and loudness in all waves. All waves have a note and they hit you at a certain volume. That's waves. That's all of them. Whether it be your breathing, whether it be the waves that you see, any of the waves that you see in the ocean, the waves, honestly too, like when you see those clouds form bands in the sky, those are waves in the atmosphere. And they have a frequency, which you can associate with a pitch, and they have an amplitude, which you can associate with how loud or soft it is, which would be like the difference between the top and bottom of the wave. So, and again, kind of what we're saying here too is that our ancestors, just by being able to sing 2 notes against each other, were really, really honestly creating some of the most sophisticated computer systems of all time. And I'm telling you for a fact that it was with sound, making tones, that people first discovered what the number systems were, discovered that there were, again, the first question that I'm bringing up here is, what is reality? Is there a reality that cannot be just manipulated and changed by everybody's desire to manipulate and change it? Is there one thing that just stays? Is there one thing that we actually have to all agree on because it is the thing we all agree on, whether we like that or not? And like, that's like really what pitch is saying, like, and if I sing a pitch and somebody else sings that pitch with me, the sense of agreement that happens when those 2 pitches resonate together, I mean, if you've experienced it, you know what's up. Like, it's knowledge. That's the seed of knowledge. Like, before people had language, clapping together and singing pure long tones together is the seed of consciousness in human beings. And that's a fact. And I'm gonna kind of like push this just one thing, like before we get into like this little exercise, it's gonna like help us think about this too. like, because this was what kind of blew my mind when you and I were talking, Kirsten. I want to touch on it quick before we go to the rhythm thing, which is like, okay, so I asked this question when we started out, what is sound, right? And everybody's answer was right, for real. Like, there's no wrong answer. Like, sound is an emotion. That's crazy to me. I don't understand that. But the parts that I do understand is that sound is like a structure that has this frequency to it. Okay, it's like a vibration, a structure that has this frequency to it. Like, I'm not saying that answer is more right or less right than anybody else's answer. I'm just saying that's one thing that we can come to such a robust agreement on. And the other thing that I said to Kirsten, I remember, was I was like, well, before we can actually talk about what sound is, we actually have to answer another really weird question. And that question is, what is air?
Air is an acronym, something I kind of just thought, jot down my own personal thoughts.
Is it
Air,
really?
yeah, well, air is something that kind of, well, air, I guess, is an acronym as I look at it, always in rhythm. Air never loses rhythm. So that's just kind of like what I think air is. Air is
That's
something that kind of
brilliant, man.
just carries, air is something that carries something until it's completed. So air itself is a rhythm
That's cool.
that never changes.
I love that. I love that so much.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Appreciate
I
it.
wow. Does anybody else have any feelings towards what air is?
I guess I'll just add the kind of perspective that it's like a loose set of molecules bumping into each other.
Yeah, anybody else? What is air?
Well, it's definitely what we breathe, and also it gives structure to a lot of things like a tire or a balloon.
Yeah, yeah.
It gives structure. That's cool. Yeah, it does.
Air's heavy.
It actually is.
Mm.
I always thought about like transfusion. I'm really interested in transfusion. So air and transfusion. Or transfusing.
Like air being transfused?
Like, I guess it's again like synchronous with our own bodies in that we're constantly transfusing and taking in and taking out air. So like some kind of
Dude,
transmission.
honestly, like, if people really realized what the fuck was going on in their lungs, they would be like, that's crazy. Like, you take in air and it touches your lungs, and inside your lungs, the oxygen dissolves into the your lung, and while the oxygen is dissolving, carbon dioxide is coming out of solution. So like, you are always absolutely deeply in contact with the air at all times. And the biggest, like, the only thing that I really needed to say about this too was that, like, you were in an air envelope. If your mouth and ears and nose weren't completely full of air at all times, like a fish, you would die instantly. Like, you are inside of a fluid ocean that is the entire, that is just like a big fluid around us that we're moving through. And the real truth is that sound cannot happen not in a fluid. Like, like, sound can happen in the solid, but it's a different thing than we think of as sound. Like, because if sound doesn't happen in air, you cannot hear it, because all you're hearing is the vibration that is happening in the air that gets inside of your ear hole.
Thinking about like all of these reminders about sound and waves has been so helpful and I've been trying to like use GarageBand as a music making tool, and like I've just always felt like unsatisfied with what was going on. And since this workshop, I've just been like reverse looping fragments of sound to like make waves, and like waves that interact with other waves. And I'm having a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
Cool. There's lots of different ways to play with like what we're working on, and I definitely find like knowing that it's like sculpture that we're doing, like, and it's like it's sort of invisible too, because if there were like really really light particles of fluff that were just so perfectly light, they would move with the sound, you know, and you could see they're very literal structures in air, like, and like if our eyes were just a little bit more tuned to see them, and the very fact that they're structures is important too. It's like, you ever notice how you can hear a sound and it'll maybe like make something vibrate that's far away, and so that is called resonance, and it only happens when two things are tuned to the exact same frequency. And why that is because you see in this like little gap here where I have where it's rarefied, where I say rare, like that is an actual, like this distance here, right? That's an actual distance that could be measured by like say centimeters or something like that, right? Like, I don't know, this could be like 5 centimeters, right? And so then if you have like a little cup that where the diameter of the cup is exactly 5 centimeters, this rarefied portion will fit exactly in it, and the cup will ring. And so that's what ringing is. It's because we're actually making structures in air. And if the structure in air is the exact same shape as something in the space it's in, it will interact with that. And sound moves through walls, right? So it moves through your body, which means that when you hear a tone like oh, it's setting up structures inside your body that are this size, that are millimeters big, that are the size of the cavities inside your body. And it does, in fact, massage you from the inside out. That's what we're doing with sound. Like, this is why our ancestors have been working with sound for millions and millions of years. Why, like, all cultural ceremony, anything that has to do with healing, with magic, like, sound is connected to that. And it's because it's how we learn. I mean, an ultrasound, it's vibration. They're picking up vibration. They're looking at a baby inside you. That's a fact. Like, and the different vibrations that they see are just related to the different sizes of things inside that baby inside you. So it's really real. There's a
Really nice to draw those connections and connect those dots from like this to real life, just things that we see and know. And it's really nice to know what we're doing when we're making sound, like to really know, I'm excited to know this and then sing, you know? Does anyone have any thoughts or questions about any of what we've gone over so far? Even just, yeah, like a thought. Arjun says, I just learned about sound baths. Yeah. I've seen those, but now I have such a better understanding of like what's really happening, right?
Nick, could you like illustrate or talk about like what happens with sound in like spaces or environments where like sound waves can't travel, or they dissipate quickly, or like it's just not possible to pass sound? Or
yeah, I mean, that it's kind of an interesting question. Like, where is there no sound? Like its
Space?
sound
I don't know.
is what I'm telling you it is here, which is just a vibration in the air, right? That looks like this, where like, oh, what is soundproofing? Yeah, so back to all these questions. And it's so what you're doing is you see how like this package of air is close together and then this package of air is further apart? And that has to do with the shapes that the sound is making. Well, so the sound, what's actually happening is that these packages, as they get close together, they then push on these ones, and it just like causes just this energy to move, even though the air molecule itself is only going back and forth, right? It's not moving from its place. And um, so that's why sound travels so good in air, because it just like the air molecules keep bouncing off each other and it keeps moving. And then so what happens is that anytime a sound hits a barrier where the speed of sound changes, it's just when the speed of sound changes, a portion of the energy will be reflected backwards this way. Um, yeah, a portion of the energy will be reflected back that way, and then a portion of the energy will carry on like this, and it will start another wave that will happen right there, if that's like, say, where the little wall was. And that wall could be anything. It could even just be a little cloud of wall of density. You know what I mean? And so whenever sound travels well, it's when the speed of sound does not change. And if the speed of sound changes, sound will be reflected. And what causes the speed of sound to change? Something being in the way. Um, and so any time a fluid is fully connected, you can be sure that sound will travel throughout that whole fluid. And so what soundproofing is actually, and temperature does affect the speed of sound. So the two things, like anything that affects density affects the speed of sound. So anywhere that there's a change in density, you get a reflection. And what do we call the accumulation of all of the reflections that you hear in a room? Does anyone know?
Reverb?
It's reverb. That's all that reverb is. It's that every time you talk, every single reflective surface in that room talks the exact sound back at you instantly. The only reason you don't notice it is like you notice it if you go to a mountain range, sure, right? You're like, well, you're like, yodelay-hee-hoo, and it comes back like, hee-hoo. That's happening to you in your room right now. It's just you don't hear your yodelay-hee-hoo because the wall is so close. And so all sound is like always getting attenuated by bouncing off of other things. And so how soundproofing really works too is it's actually full of little holes that are full of air. And so the sound has to keep transferring through the solid back into the air, back into the solid, back into the air. And every time it transfers, it loses some energy and passes some on. And that's how you dissipate sound.
Wow.
Any foam will do it. That's why. Any
Wow.
foam, any blanket, if you
Interesting.
can create a layer of something, a layer of air, a layer of something, a layer of air. And what is the single greatest insulator of sound? It's air. And what's the single greatest, like one of the greatest transfers of sound? Air. You can't hear sound without it.
I have a question.
Oh,
Not, I guess it's not derailing, but I heard this thing where there's this like soundproof room that's like the most soundproof room in the world, and that people can't spend more than a certain amount of time in it or they go crazy.
Yeah.
So like,
I
why?
heard of that.
Yeah, why is that? Has anyone else heard of that?
Yeah, I think to kind of answer that question, 'cause I was just looking at it randomly one day.
Oh,
please, yeah.
I believe Microsoft owns like this super quiet room where they gotta, I guess they kind of like have an understanding of sound. And then what it is like the sound, the room basically is kind of just, I guess, designed in a way where all the foam padding or whatever material they use to kind of super insulate the sound, I guess, is organized or angled in a certain way where sound can neither leave or enter the room because it's completely nullified because it's absorbed by all the foam padding material that they use. And literally the only sounds you can hear are inside your body. So that's the only sound you get. You can just feel and hear the sound on an internal level. So that's kind of like the science behind it. And yes, if you do sit in there for a long amount of time, if you don't have a certain level of resolve, it can impact you if you're just not used to or don't understand what's happening to your body when you're in that space.
Yeah, like I was
Yep, fun
wondering.
fact.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're good.
Are you talking or was that my own echo? I was just gonna say, yeah, like that is, would you say that's the reason people go crazy? That's what they say, like people cannot do it. Is it because you're hearing the sounds of your body and that's freaky to people? Or do you think that
I think because it's a new way of hearing that people don't understand what's happening because you hear with your ears. If you hear it through other senses in the body, it's just like, okay, what's going on? I feel like I'm being thrown off my balance here. So that's what I think is
like
happening. I could be wrong.
But yeah, okay, that sounds right.
I
Yeah,
feel something.
the reason. Sorry.
I feel something similar at nighttime, like when it is a lot more quiet and like, there aren't many other sounds. And when I hear the sound of another person's heartbeat, I feel like it makes me uneasy. Like I can't, I get like, I feel like I can't breathe properly or like I can't find my own rhythm. And I just feel like I need to move away from hearing someone else's pulse.
Yeah, it could even be, Arjun, that like the frequency of your breath and your pulse is like close to but not resonant with their breath and their pulse, and it creates that sense of dissonance when you have two waves which are close to being aligned but aren't quite aligned. So they can feel, it can feel like that you know, that the sounds that you hear in music that sound like weird, like kind of like creepy or whatever, are caused by that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I would love to experience that room.
Yeah, notes that don't go together sound really cool.
Yeah. I'm like, my brain is doing so much right now.
I feel like I kind of.
Nick, you're muted, by the way, if you're been speaking.
Can people hear me if I have a question? No.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wait, am I
But-
still muted?
Great. Okay, we can hear you, Nick, and we can also hear you, Calvin.
Oh,
There's
you can
something
really hear
going on,
me.
like some background thing. It's a bit confusing.
Oh.
I'm just trying to see if someone's
How's that?
doesn't know. Okay, sorry, carry on. Not sure.
I was just wondering, like, how we got from talking about sound waves going in like both directions on that diagram that's on the shared screen, to talking about reverb and all that. Like, I think I understand when the sound wave comes, it hits the surface, like some energy goes into it and some comes back. But yeah, I'm like, if you start a sound somewhere, are you just also saying that it like resonates in all directions, not just one?
Exactly, yeah. And it goes out in all directions. And what reverb is, honestly, is just the sound that comes back. So if you go and stand out in a big, gigantic field, I mean, obviously still sound will come back to you, but only from what it does. So if you stand in a field and play your saxophone, and go, bah, there'll be no reverberation, but like you'll hear a giant reverb, right? Because you'll hear the reverb from the huge empty space. But all that reverb ever is the fact that some sound move forward and some sound moves back. And that also means that like every single object in your room vibrates every time you speak in complete resonance with your speaking voice. And that is the reverberation in the room. The truth is, unless you make a loud enough sound, the reverb will be quite quiet. But anybody who plays an instrument inside a house, or like if you yell in your room as loud as you can, you'll hear the sound of your room. You light it up. And actually every wall, every empty jar resonates. It's just how that works, you know? So before I run out of time, I actually kind of really do want to try to do this workshop with it, or this like one little exercise with everybody. And then also too, like if anyone has questions, feel free to reach out to us in email, or like as you know, we're gonna keep doing like 2 more of these workshops, and would love it if you guys come back and have questions. Like I haven't done this many times online, and the most that I get out of it is from like what other people's experiences are. So I'm just like so grateful that you guys are here. And the next question I have is just, can you hear this click? You can hear it, right? Okay. And so awesome. Okay. And so we're just gonna like, the exercise is pretty simple. We're just gonna clap together. And so how this works is I'm just gonna put on this metronome and we're just gonna clap to it. Yeah, if anyone has, again, so I'm just gonna move forward as though everybody's just kind of on the same page. And if anybody has any questions, just holler, please. And mute yourself. No, mute.
I said one giant clap.
And the thing that we're trying to get to here is it's really meditation. Like it really is just a meditation exercise. Yeah, and so there's no right or wrong way to do this. Oh, is somebody else unmuted? And I don't know if anybody is feeling this, but what you'll notice is that like there's like a center to the time, and then there are like sides to the time, you know? Like there's sometimes that you just hit that click so right on when you clap with it, right? And there's some it disappeared again?
No, when you like hit it dead on.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah. And like just like trying to clap right on the click so that you can't even hear the click. And again, there's no right or wrong. The whole point of this exercise is to just acknowledge reality. Like sometimes your click is on. Sometimes you're behind the click. Sometimes you're in front of the click. That's real life, you know? And the whole point of this clapping exercise, I've never done it over Zoom. I feel a little bit nuts doing this. But in real life, you can feel everyone's clap together. And when we all clap together, you just feel a sense of togetherness. And when our claps are slightly off, we can feel like a sound. And so this is like, again, this is like the most basic accountability practice in history. Either you're on or you're off. And the goal is to just really relax into it, and we're going to keep clapping together, right? Is everyone still in on this? Because I'm going to shift it up in a sec, and we're going to really feel how this works as an accountability practice, because that's what this is all about, okay? And so what I can do is I can send you a track that does this, if anyone wants to try it later, So everybody keep that clap going, right? You're keeping it going, you're keeping it going, keep 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 it going, whoops. Keep it going, okay, sorry. Keep it going, keep it going, keep it going. And now keep clapping at that pace. So you're clapping twice for every click you hear, right? That's harder. Now the only way that you'll be hitting those off beats on is if your pulse was steady from the first one. Okay, keep going, keep going, keep going. Keep going. So now you're clapping 4 times for every time the computer clips. It's harder. And remember that this isn't like there's no right or wrong, but there is in it. And you can't solve it with your mind. You have to feel it. And you just feel it by relaxing into it and knowing that it's real. That it's really there. And it's not going to change on you. It's not fucking with you. The metronome does not gaslight you. It just operates. And this is like, you know, you can really learn to trust that. And are we keeping this 4 going?
Yeah.
Okay, so keep it going, keep it going. Keep it going.
Oh,
Definitely mute yourself if you unmuted yourself.
it's interesting to observe my feelings as
Okay,
I'm
yeah, I'm gonna and we'll pause for a second and yeah, say what's
yeah.
up.
Well, we don't have to pause. Everyone can continue to clap, but
Yeah, right.
it's if you can, I'm like, I feel you. I'm drowning in clap. Yeah, like I'm gone. You know what? I did two that were on and I was really proud of myself and I wish everyone knew about it. So I'm telling you. But yeah, I did a couple that were on and I was like, okay. But yeah, it's interesting to observe my feelings and my perspective because it's like when I'm off on the claps, it's almost like it feels like the metronome is speeding up or slowing down, right? And it's like I know it isn't. I know it's me, but like my perspective, like does anyone else feel like it's wavy? Like sometimes it's faster and sometimes it's slower when we know it isn't. But it feels
Yeah.
like that when we are a little off. Like it's, and I felt like it was rushy or it was lagging or something. I don't know. It's weird. And then like the anxiety almost, not real anxiety because I know it's really not like that type of situation, but I feel my body like, oh, it's just off.
You know
Right.
what's crazy? What the crazy truth is? It's that sense of anxiety that causes time to dilate. And like if you experience anxiety like that, it fucks your time because it literally makes time dilate for you. Literally. And so your rhythm will not be with everybody else's rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we actually have to relax into the clap. It's deep, like it's really deep on that level.
I noticed that. Wow. I really noticed it when I didn't think about it too much and I just chilled and I did it. That's when I was like, whoa, I was clapping with the metronome and I was like, whoa, that like, wow, okay. I just have no words because I'm just thinking too much, but really interesting. It felt like it is meditative because you're almost required to meditate in order to do it properly, you know? So, wow.
And when a couple seconds pass per clap, that's less than 1 hertz. Like it's 0.5 hertz. That's what clapping at that. Though that's what those frequencies are. Those are the lowest frequencies are clapping in gigantic cycles. And I'm telling you again, you go look at the indigenous people of the world, the oldest systems of knowledge are these. Period. You go in Japan, you'll see people who keep 64 bar cycles, hitting the drum only once through entire 64 bar cycles, where maybe 15 minutes pass every time between they're supposed to hit it, and they are exactly on. Yeah. And it's because that's, and what's that frequency? This is the lowest frequencies
I
that
can't even
human beings
imagine
can keep. Yeah.
to feel that time within yourself where you could just, wow.
It really sucks that we're not all in the same room together because it, like, my teacher taught us this. And honestly, for 2 months while we did music classes, we never took out our instruments. We only sat in a room and clapped together like this and would clap on this. And then you have to leave out four. And then we leave out 16. Then we leave out 32. Then we leave out 64. And when you leave out 64, everybody claps on a different one, you know? Until you learn to really be together on this one. Because if you're not together on that one, the bigger gradations have to shift. You have to be landing all at different places. And so this is like what we mean when we talk about agreement. Like, this is the only kind of not coercive agreement there is. Like clapping together in that way, like everybody's clap is equal. If they're not all together, the shit's ruined. Like,
Wow. Does anyone else want to share their experience or thoughts when doing that activity? Whoa, yeah.
I feel like on that thing of like everybody's clap is equal, and Kirsten, kind of what you were saying about like blaming the clap. I mean the click. Um, it's like so. It's just kind of like a peep into just like the way that we're kind of wired to function, which is unfortunately that um, we're always right and at the center of things. But like framing it as an accountability practice really like brings back to mind that, like you said, like time is just an agreement. All these standards we have are just agreement, and like I can see us being in a room and like feeling like, oh shit, the person who's been playing music their whole life like is gonna have like, you know, a strong sense of pulse, or like all my sense of rhythm shit because I'm an anxious person, and like, you know, my clap is worth less because of that. But then like even if that person who knows the most and is so chill, um, and has no problems is like on, it's like if I'm off, then they're equally ruining it. You know what I mean? Like it's like because of that, it just like levels it in that way. So like no one can be righter than someone else in it, which is just like such an interesting non-hierarchical thing about it.
Until the computer, you know, too. Until the computer comes along and gives us a metronome and tells us what's right, the only person who could tell you what was right was an elder, and that's a fucking fact. Like,
I have a question, but maybe
yeah.
it's like maybe it's a bit off color. But what if people want to deviate from the like the perceived beat? Like, do you have examples of people purposely rebelling against it? I just because my like performance art brain was like, what if I don't do it as everyone else is doing it? But it felt good to be a part of something.
Yo, it's
Can I jump in too, just right quick?
yeah.
Just like I have this new teacher in my life and it's the first time I've had like a close music teacher who's not white. Not the first time, but the first time I've had one that was black. And like one of the first things was just like all like whatever you want to call it, modern music that just like has a beat, whatever. Like only what's happening is stuff against the beat. So like all jazz, black American music, whatever you want to call it, it's the most interesting shit, and the shit that just makes it bop is what's happening against the beat. So when you have like some people call it syncopation, but again like that's like a westernized word and stuff. And and then he was just like, yeah, all these people that talk about polyrhythm, syncopation, like are really just bullshit white people that have no idea that they're just talking about the music that our grandmothers have been making forever. And so like I would say that like everything is against the beat, like in the same way that it's like the ground of everything.
Resistance.
Oh yeah, and also too, even what you're saying, Riss, like it's just so heavy, and like again, like I don't like this Zoom thing because we have to talk about it, because like if we weren't in on Zoom, you could experience it for yourself in the clapping. And again, like this is like I don't want to just sound like such a like in this way, but like indigenous people have fully fucking figured this shit out, y'all. Like if you go to indigenous people anywhere in the world, and I mean especially here on Turtle Island, you will see a drum. And you know, and nobody goes around to everybody and is like, hey, hit the drum on the beat with everybody. Nobody says that. And you can convince yourself that's true. And fuck, you don't even have to. You don't. You know? Like all the elders will come and they'll put it down where it is. And you can I have been to so many to like different kinds of indigenous circles where some people play the drum like how the hell they want to play it. You know? And like it doesn't fuck the time. It doesn't screw up the time, right? Like it's 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 us judging each other for being off that fucks the time. It's that's what pulls us out of it. Like honestly, like I have done this. I mean, like yeah, Hannah, you've seen, right? We've sat around at Khyber, old Khyber, for hours and hours and just had people clap. And like once you realize that what you're listening to is everybody's true feeling about authority and agreement, then you're fucking listening to something. Like, if somebody chooses to clap not with the group, it's just a decision, it's just a choice, you know? Like, sometimes it feels great. Sometimes it feels fucking annoying. You're like, why is that person always ruining the thing? And honestly, it doesn't even matter what anybody else thinks about what you're going through. Like, when you clap with the beat, sometimes it feels great. When you clap against a beat, sometimes it feels great. When you clap with the beat, sometimes it feels awful. And like only you know that. And that's why this accountability shit is wicked. Cause like we're just saying, let's all clap on the beat together. And if it feels like fucked, then we know it, you know? Because what we're doing is creating this thing that we're doing together. And like with the computer, it makes it different. Because like if I put on the computer's reading the time and we're all clapping to it, sure, the desire to fuck with that is there. But I'm telling you, when time is fragile and we're trying to create large, big, like womp, womp together, fuck. The very first time I experienced that in Jerry's class, when we clapped the 64 together, like this group of like 4 or 5 of us, we were just like, yo, because it means that nobody lost any, nobody shaved a single hair off one of those 64 claps in between. And the only reason we did that together is because we cared. There's nothing else to it. It's so basic. We just wanted to, like, we'd wasted months clapping against each other and it not working out, you know. And like
I would love
everybody,
to try that. Like, I would love to sit and try that in a group in person. That'd be amazing. I think it's almost like it's almost like we can do anything rhythmically, but there's always this respect for the true rhythm that we all agree upon, you know? So I think maybe to like respond to Marissa and also Kelvin's comment, it's just like, yeah, like do whatever you want, but always have that respect, I think.
yo, and
And
also,
knowing where it is, you can always rejoin the group whenever.
yeah, and also I just think how Mo said it in the chat about like this is an equity practice. This is an equity practice. In fact, like if you have a hierarchical group setting, why don't you put 5 minutes aside and clap together? Like you will learn so much about that group. You will learn so much. And my teacher taught me this. Like I'm not some person who's like figured it out. Clap with a group. You will see right away who thinks they're the daddy of the group. I'm telling you. They'll try to clap louder. They'll try to push, they'll try to put the time down where they think it is, and you will watch everybody in the group follow their time. Yeah, who is the and then but again too, honestly, like it starts to not get fun because you realize that somebody's always clapping the hardest time and people are following them and that's not cool. So then even the person who's clapping the hardest time has to actually learn how to like chill the fuck out so that other people can hear what the group's consensus is. Like,
Yeah, and it's like an exercise in listening as well. Like
yeah,
I found when doing that, I had to really listen because I just wanted to hear myself. I wanted to just be like, okay, clappity clap, like do it. But I had to really listen.
and
And
when it's not the computer putting it down, I'm telling you, like, either people are together or they're not. And you can, like, this is the best metric for testing whether a band is ready to do a set or not. Like, if y'all can't clap together, don't play music together. Don't. Don't. And honestly, like, if you can clap together, go to war together. Like you can probably pass a ball between each other. You know what I mean? Like every single physical activity requires rhythm. Clapping together, you watching militaries march in step, that's not by chance. Like it's about agreement. It's about agreement and how agreement works. And like I like the like again this cool thing about music is like I don't like what I'm doing, which is sitting here and talking about it. And if we sat in a group and clapped about it, like that shit would teach everybody their own lesson. Like and two, like I you don't need me to do it. Like sit, go and get 4 friends, clap together, and then leave out one of every four, leave out one of every eight, leave out one of every 16.
and thank you so much for coming. Um, I'm not sure if you had anything to close, but I just wanted to say that, like, if anyone has to go, that's fine. And we appreciate you so much.
I mean, I think we did. I think we covered. I think I did. Like, this is good. Okay,
Sound-
feel free to reach out anytime, you
Yeah.
guys, if you need anything. You're the best.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, good night.